You were the lead investigator in this case, correct?
Well, let's define terms a little bit. I was the detective sergeant for the city of Palestine. So
Okay,
I was supervising all investigations. Uh,
absolutely.
the nature of this one was, yes, I was um, the senior investigator, and so I was responsible for what it became. Yes.
Mhm. Okay, so when you first started overseeing the investigation and investigating this case, what was there that what was brought to your attention or brought into evidence that led you guys to believe that Robertson was guilty at that time?
Well, the we responded to Palestine Regional Medical Center for what they reported to us as child abuse. The initial investigator was on scene, found a child that was in very critical condition, and they were going to move her to Nikki. We're going to move Nikki to Children's Hospital in Dallas, and so he called for some help so that we could kind of get everything done before they moved her. And so myself and another detective responded. Um, at the scene, I mean, at the hospital, there was the family, there was the medical staff, and just the response of the medical staff to the circumstances um, kind of communicated that this was really critical. And then the conversations were around an abusive injury. Um, Somewhere in there, this idea of shaken baby syndrome um, came into the vernacular of the conversation. Um, and so, yeah, we started to talk to the family. We documented what we could there in the hospital. Um, we talked to Robert. We had already been told, or I had already been told by some of the staff there in the hospital that I don't want to put words in anybody's mouth, but generally it was he's different. He's not responding in the usual kind of ways as people assume someone would with a child in that condition. And so we went and talked to Robert, and we just found that to be the way it was. That Robert was very unemotional, very kind of flat affect. He was answering all of our questions in very simple form, but no energy, no emotion. And so yeah, that struck us as a bit odd. Um, the child, Nikki, was flown to Dallas Children's Hospital, where she died the next day. But the child abuse expert at Children's affirmed for us that in affidavit form that this child was a victim of shaken baby syndrome. Um, and we proceeded from that based on Robert being the only adult with her at the time of her injury, the only other person with her at the time of her injury, and then the medical assessment that we were given. We developed a probable cause affidavit and arrested Robert.
So, looking back now, do you think, obviously technology has evolved over, I mean, even in the last 22 years, it doesn't, I still think 30 years ago and I think 1970, and I'm like, oh my gosh, no, that was, that was 1995. So do you think at that time there was, obviously shaken baby syndrome is something that is horrific when it happens to children, that there was a lot of pressure to convict, especially with this kind of theory of how Nikki was injured?
Well, there was pressure to convict. I think nobody wants to see a child hurt in that way, and a young child, 2-year-old child, to be in that condition. And so there is a kind of urgency, I guess, that kind of can take hold of everybody in the process. We want to find the person that's responsible. She didn't do it to herself. Who did this? And so that question, seeking who did it, and not giving enough attention to what exactly happened, is where we got into some problems. And as quick as we identified Robert as the one who did it, um, we just went from there and built a case around it.
So over the years, obviously, your view on this case and his conviction has changed. What do you remember? What it was that made you start questioning if he was really guilty or innocent? And what was there a particular piece of evidence or something that just popped in your head? What kind of got your gears rolling on that to think maybe he's not guilty of this?
Well, I had always had some concerns about the trial, and I thought that the appellate system would create some relief for him just based on that issue. But I guess 10 years down the road, his defense attorney found me where I was living at the time, um, and explained to me that the science had changed relative to Shaken Baby Center. That what we had been working on, the assumption was science, tested science, as it turns out, had only ever been a theory that kind of got traction and ran. And so in the years in between, some science had occurred, some testing had occurred, and essentially that which we had based our case on just fell apart. It doesn't hold up under scrutiny. And so when Shaken Baby, as we understood it in the moment, as that went away, everything else just falls. It's a house of cards. It doesn't stand up, And then his current defense attorney has just added more and more and more science to the conversation, and the more science that we actually looked at, the more we looked at her medical history, her medical records, and actually the testing that was done on her the night of her injury, the CT scans from Palestine Regional Medical Center that were never looked at by the medical examiner or the people in the hospital at Children's. So all of those pieces put together tell an entirely different story. One that doesn't kind of say, it just kind of emphatically says that there's no offense here. This was a very, very sick child from early on, and a series of medical mistakes and miscalculations along the way put her in the critical state that she was in that eventually killed her.
So I can just imagine that this was, for you to go back and reconsider what happened, difficult. It would be for any law enforcement professional, just like I would assume it would be for a medical professional going back and saying, "Oh no, what I thought was wrong." So how did it affect you professionally and personally to go back and kind of fight with yourself and reconsider that he may not be responsible for this?
Well, I don't know that I would call it a fight because, you know, I, I was raised by good parents, and they told me wrong is wrong and right is right, and if you make a mistake, correct it. And I've kind of stuck with that my whole life. Um, as I said, I was not comfortable with the trial. I thought there were some things that were in error there that should have been corrected, and when they weren't, and then the rest of this information comes along, then it's just I really don't have a choice here. It is incumbent upon me to speak the truth, um, and come what may here. So,
And have you had the opportunity to speak directly with Robert since the fight for his freedom and new trial has commenced?
I've been visiting Robert probably monthly for the last since prior to his last execution date, so a year and a half or so. Um, yeah.
So how did he react to you telling him that you believe he's innocent and that it was not abuse that Nikki died from?
First visit, um, I um, I went in there with, the notion that he would have some things to say to me, and so I told him. I said, Robert, I'm sorry that that you're here. I'm sorry that the system has kept you here when clearly you're an innocent man. Um, but you don't have to accept my apology. You can, and I gave him permission to, say whatever you want to say to me. Um, and essentially, he forgave me. No, he did. He forgave me, and since then, it's just been our conversations about his life, his children, our faith. We're friends, and that's what we talk about. Um, yeah, he has been to me. It's the miracle in the midst of all this. Here's a man who's been in prison for 20 years for something that he did not do. And he's not the least bit angry or bitter. He is full of grace and he is full of joy. And he welcomes visitors, even people like me. And so, yeah, he's the better man.
So, I mean, has what kind of reforms or safeguards do you think need to be put into place to help prevent what y'all call wrongful conviction like this in the future?
Well, the state of Texas was kind of a trendsetter years ago. The legislature passed a law that gave people in prison the right to file writs if junk science was involved in their convictions. But the law has not worked out the way the legislature intended it to. The Court of Criminal Appeals has um, kind of reinterpreted it to make it almost as if a defendant has to come and show innocence before they will do anything. So it's not worked the way that they intended. Um, as a matter of fact, none of the writs filed by death row inmates for a new trial based on junk science, none of them have received a positive finding by the Court of Criminal Appeals. Some of the cases from the general population have, but not from death row. So there's a bias there somehow or another. So I don't know if the legislature, there were hearings last year about this, and hopefully the legislature will go back and tweak the language of that law however they need to make sure it's used the way that the legislature intended. Um, and I don't know. I mean, I think at some point along the way there has to be um, the legislature has to create some sort of mechanism by which these, particularly off of death row, that they have to be heard. Um, and even in Robert's case, the courts have found procedural reasons to not look at the evidence. So up until this last filing, nobody had actually looked at the new evidence because they found all these other reasons not to. We're facing a death date, even though there is at least, I think, 3 writs still waiting for a judge to rule on them. So maybe there's another place in there where the legislature says as long as there are writs pending, we cannot sign a death warrant. I don't know. I mean, there's got to be some legislative bumpers that we can put in place here to make sure that, particularly with death sentence cases, that they are heard, that evidence is reviewed, that the humanity and the rights and the due process afforded to these people is duly respected in every case, not just in the ones that feel good, but in all cases.
So he currently has an execution date set for October 16th. What, in the event that does not get stayed, that he does not get a new trial, how does he feel about this?
Robert has spent, 20 years of his life with few other people to talk to than God. And so he's not wasted his time. What he says is he's ready. He doesn't want to die, but he is ready. He is not a fearful man. He is sure of what waits for him on the other side, whatever that looks like for you, for him. He's at peace. It is sad that he is in a position where he has to contemplate those things. Well, it's more than sad. It's reprehensible that he is in a place where he has to contemplate those things, simply because the system is trying to protect itself and does not want to hear his voice.
So, just kind of to wrap all this up, is there anything else that you feel that the public really should know about Mr. Robertson's case, or your journey from, where you've come over the past 20 years?
I think this moments like this arrive because, in some measure, because of the apathy of the people. Okay. We had a rally for Robert in Austin Saturday with 100 people in attendance, which is, not a bad number, but the state of Texas is about to kill an innocent man, and 100 people showed up. That kind of speaks volumes about the level of apathy that kind of infects us, that unless it's touching me, unless it's hurting me, I'm not going to mess with it. But this is a case study in government disconnected from the people, in government hiding behind the rules and procedures they've put in place to hide behind. I'd be willing to bet that, if you asked any of them, they'll say, well, we were just following the law. The jury found him guilty. All the platitudes that come in this moment will be voiced in the next couple of weeks. And all that gives them a place to hide from the truth that Robert's attorney has been trying heroically for 10 years now to get in front of any court, but no court will hear it. And that should scare us all.